in the mind of the man who was called J. Edgar Hoover, he seemed to have great difficulty in accepting people who happened to be of African ancestry. His record as director of the FBI, the anti-Martin Luther King mania almost, his COINTELPRO programs, special programs aimed only at black leaders, special programs aimed only at black leaders, special programs aimed only at black leaders.
What would you say to citizens who sit and listen to what you've said and have a sense of frustration and helplessness?
There are some agents, the old line agents, that disagree with the tactics that were used during the so-called COINTEL period. But one thing I don't want us to jump off of is that people always talk about, they're talking about COINTEL now so heavily. I'm not talking about COINTEL, I'm talking about a thing called BD, which was better known as Black Death. The Black Death was set up for a simple thing of infiltrating black organizations and black groups, whatever.
Where was this Black Desk, or were there a number of them?
There were a number of Black Desks, but the head Black Desk was in Washington, D.C., controlled by Sullivan. And the...
Was he black?
No.
And what was the function of the Black Desks all over the country? I guess there were dozens.
The function of the Black Desk was to monitor activity, social unrest, revolutionary groups, cultural groups, and such in the black community.
And feed it into this central desk. And it still exists?
As far as I know, yes.
Special programs aimed only at black leaders. Special programs aimed only at black leaders. Special programs aimed only at black leaders.
Who they? Well, that's basically what the Bible dictionary is doing. When you get to a certain name like Anakites and it's in the Bible, and everybody says, where did it come from? Well, let me tell you where they came from.
Tell us. Come on with it. Tell us.
Those are the fallen angels who left and came back. And now you're looking for them to have blonde hair and blue eyes. Right. No, they look like us. Right. They're in this room with us right now. Right. They're in the community here. They were in the Nation of Islam. They were in the Modern Science Temple. They were with Marcus Garvey. They were with Dr. Martin Luther King. They were with Clarence 13X. True. They're always right here with you. Causing trouble.
That's right. That's right.
And if you ain't one, then look at the guy next to you. He might be.
J. Edgar Hoover had long relied on casual informants, but now, in his determination to go after Garvey, Hoover hired the first full-time black agent in the Bureau's history.
He was known by a code number. All his reports were signed 800. That was his code. And his job was to go into Harlem and to infiltrate the Garvey movement, to try and find evidence that could be used to build a legal case for ultimately getting rid of Garvey.
Garvey was betrayed by the few people he trusted to get the Black Star Line afloat. The man he asked to inspect the Yarmouth turned out to be an informant for J. Edgar Hoover. And his hand-picked captain, Joshua Coburn, convinced Garvey to pay 6 times what the ship was worth, and then took a kickback from the purchase price. Yet Garvey quickly raised and spent $200,000 on 2 more ships.
One of the most disliked white men in the black community, allegedly, was black himself. That rumor doesn't surprise those who observe some of those blacks who pass over and become white bigots to cover their tracks, or perhaps they just suffer from self-hatred. But it sent Millie McGee back to her family tree in Macomb, Mississippi, to see if the man who became synonymous with the FBI and hatred of Martin Luther King Jr. was himself her cousin, who had gone through the special Underground Railroad built from the South to Washington, D.C., for blacks who looked white enough to live. Thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Your book, Secrets Uncovered, J. Edgar Hoover, Passing for White. And I said passing for white because there's a question mark. Why the title Passing for White, question mark?
Because when I first started writing the book, I did not realize that J. Edgar Hoover was actually in my lineage, and I was told it was rumors in the family that he was, and just rumors. So I knew that I had to put question mark until I did some research and made out for sure that he was a part of the family. The information that I found, a picture that he put in his biography saying that it was him. And it wasn't. It was one of the white Hoover boys. Well, I wouldn't say he was actually white, because it seems like, according to the research, he was mulatto too. I wasn't doing research to find out and discover and say that he was also a black man.
Now, this is his brother.
This is the one that he called his brother.
Now, this is his picture, which is in the Hoover Room at the Masonic Shrine,
right,
in Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
And when you go into the Masonic Shrine, there is a man and a woman identified as J. Edgar Hoover's parents with a little boy.
Exactly.
For years, this little boy was identified as J. Edgar Hoover.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I believe he's identified as Davidson Hoover.
He's identified,
who is J. Edgar Hoover's brother.
Yes, Dickerson.
Dickerson.
Dickerson was 15 years older than J. Edgar Hoover. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the picture, you look very close at the picture in my book, the paper on that picture shows that it was much older than J. Edgar Hoover. It was made before, but he said that that's when he was 5 years old. And he has a picture of him when he was 4 years old. And you look at them, you can see that it's two different faces.
There was a picture that is still in the Masonic Shrine in Washington, D.C.
Right.
That for years, in the identification on the picture, it identified it as J. Edgar Hoover, the little boy.
That's right.
At one point in time, at the Masonic Shrine, they changed that identification to Dickerson Hoover rather than J. Edgar Hoover.
Exactly.
So something had to happen that made the officials at the Masonic Shrine change the identification of that little boy's picture. For years, in the black community, it has been a widespread rumor during J. Edgar Hoover's life that he was a black who was passing for white.
Exactly.
This does not mean that's true. This means that it is true that there has been, for decades, during his life, even among whites, even at the FBI, and according to your book, even Hoover was aware there were rumors that he was a mulatto. And you quote a very famous white man here who we will not name, who grew up in Washington, D.C. at the same time, who you quote as saying that he also heard the rumor and that it was believed among the whites in his community, in his circle, that J. Edgar Hoover was passing for white. The
document that I found in research in the library of his birth certificate being forged is where in Washington, D.C., the mother and father list their names and they list a number to go find the child's birth certificate. Someone went into the file and wrote in handwritten his name and wrote a code WM, white male. And all the other parents on that list never list a child's name or whether it was white or black, which send up a red flag to me.
You said wrote in his name.
Wrote in J. Edgar Hoover's name under his parents. That's the only baby that was written in on that whole page, which sent a
the rest of it was typed.
They were all handwritten. Everybody's name was handwritten. The parents would go in and log your name, and you would log. Then this clerk would log a number that you go to, and then you pull the records and you look for the child name and gender and that. But on this record, someone went in and actually wrote J. Edgar Hoover, his date of birth, and a code WM, which didn't make sense to me. Who cares? I mean, nobody else in that whole page did that on hardly anything.
In other words, no other baby on that page was identified by race but J. Edgar
or
Hoover.
Name.
Or name.
Or name.
And they all had a code number that you went to.
That's right.
But in his case, there was not only a name, there was also WM designating him as a white male.
Exactly.
And that sent up a red flag. It made you suspect something, right?